name is Ella Kate Marisi, and you are listening to More Than Child's Play with your host, my mommy, Lacey Marisi, and my Aunt Nicole Surgeon. They are authors, therapists, and most importantly, mommies. And man, can they talk. So sit back and relax and learn from their village. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the More Than Child's Play podcast. This is your host, Nicole Surgent. Today, I am talking with Melissa Swartz. Melissa is the founder and the director of the Renovo Center. She has an individualized approach to client treatment and is passionate about connecting each client to the tools and team members who best fit their specific personality and needs. Her center has a no-shame approach, and she's the driving force behind that for all clients and their treatments. Melissa and her center is dedicated, they're both dedicated to the use of brain-based integrative treatments. She has a Master's of Arts in Professional Counseling from Liberty University and maintains certifications as an advanced alcohol and drug counselor, a supervisor substance abuse professional, and as an acupuncture detoxification specialist through the National Acupuncture and Detoxification Association and the West Virginia Board of Acupuncture. She's also licensed as an approved licensed professional supervisor and counselor. In her more than 25 years of experience in the mental health field, Melissa has been heavily influenced by her training in neuroscience, stress science, attachment therapy, nutrition, and evolutionary biology. I can also just say from a personal side, Melissa is a dear friend. When Lacey and I started dreaming of this podcast and brainstorming out loud a list of people that at some point we wanted to talk to, she was top on our list for many reasons, and there is no better time than the present to bring her in for the conversation that we're going to have. From a personal and a professional side, I can share that she is my go-to person when someone in my house or one of my patients is in crisis or needs support, and I have trusted her advice and appreciated it so much over the years. So, welcome, Melissa.
Thank you for having me.
We're so happy to have you. Just to let our listeners know, we invited Melissa today to talk about a broad topic, really, children, teenagers, and mental health issues surrounding the pandemic. And I just want to let you know that we threw this out there to our social media followers and to our podcast listeners. And the response in the past 48 hours, I guess, leading up to this conversation has overwhelmed me in a good way. As a parent, I know not one other parent who isn't worried about their child right now. And I was so thankful that people were brave enough to share their concerns and their questions, including some teenagers who directly messaged me themselves. And so I just think that it points to the importance of having Melissa here and how thankful we are to have her. We've all gone through such a year, and there absolutely has been mental health consequences and concerns, and we are going to tackle them. At Milestones and Miracles, we tend to focus a good bit of our time on the early years. But as we know, there are issues that affect children and teens through their lifespan. And I can't think of one that's more important to Lacey and I than mental health. So a lot of the topics today will focus on older children, but we will talk about younger children as well. And I hope that you'll find our conversation helpful because I know it's very important to me as well. So, Melissa, to get started, what do we know about how the pandemic and all of the quarantining and the changes to school, sports, and social events have affected young children and teens? And are there specific mental health issues we've seen arise?
Okay. Well, that first part is, how are they affected? Well, kind of like we all are. I mean, they're bonded and attached to us as caregivers, kind of thing. So they're adults. And so when their adults are stressed, the kids are stressed too. And so we're all stressed. And when we're in fight or flight, like survival, this has been a year of survival, right?
Absolutely.
Different parts of our brain are in charge based on how stressed we are. And when we're in survival, that's the simplest, fastest, and reflexive, least thoughtful part of our brain. And so all of our stress wires are firing. And so everything that's a problem kind of shows up, unfortunately. And so that's kind of part of what we're experiencing here, is like everything that's an issue is showing up. And so I do think everyone is finding this challenging in general. And so, I mean, that definitely everyone's affected. I think how are they affected? I think when we're stressed, there's just so many things. Like I think about some of our kids don't pivot with change very well anyways. So that's been difficult. And then our kids who thrive, like this is a long time for these big, big changes that are really unnatural. I mean, we're humans. Humans are all about community and connection. And then to take away our normal means of community and connection are just school alone for folks who attend traditional schools, like that's a huge change.
Yeah.
And it's not summer, you know what I mean? Yeah. It wasn't summer, very different. And so that is significant, I think, I think about kids who are, went from being in a brick situation to clicking, which is a significant change. And education is very different from click to brick, or brick to click and back and forth. I think some of the school districts with their back and forth of we're open this week, we're closed this week, we're open these days, closed this day. I mean, there's just a lot of back and forth that even for your junior high and high school schoolers are challenging. But I really think about the younger kids being particularly impacted by just the lack of consistency there.
Mm-hmm.
I think like before the pandemic, did our area have like, I live between Martinsburg and Shepherdstown. So like Grubhub and Uber Eats, like food's delivered everywhere now. I don't remember it being like that before. And so I think there's a lot of carry out, pickup, delivery of groceries, all kinds of stuff that wasn't before. And I've heard about the quarantine 15. I think we've eaten a lot more processed food, which is inflammatory to our bodies, on top of having a stressed gut, which causes more leaky gut kind of things where we are not breaking our food down and absorbing our nutrition, along with having some folks less nutrition coming in. You can really see that some of those outcomes or mental health issues that we're seeing are anxiety. 80% of our serotonin is in our gut, and stress alone dysregulates that. And I don't know anybody who has anxiety that doesn't have some type of gut dysregulation with that.
Right.
Suicidal thoughts, eating disorders, particularly with teenagers, in that just feeling very isolated, alienated. Some folks are having a hard time leaving the house. Teenagers, menstrual periods, adults, menstrual periods, significant, which I, have even asked around about that with healthcare professionals, and whether it's the COVID vaccine or actually having COVID, which is now a virus that impacts blood in particular. All of these things are part of all of that. And really with the neural pathways from our major organs like the heart to our brain, of course, there's this moodiness and irritability and dysregulation that can be all associated with that. So I hope that's...
No, that was a good answer. And I appreciate in Melissa's work, one of the things I love about it is that it's very wraparound and very holistic and considers biology and nutrition and environment and lots of things. And that all makes very good sense. On that road, Do we know anything about mental health issues for children and teens who have actually had COVID themselves? I've read about
Mhm.
increase in anxiety disorders with adults who have had COVID post recovery or
Mhm.
long haulers. What do we know,
Mhm.
or do we know anything about children and teens who have had COVID themselves?
I know very little, just simply because like most kids that I've learned about, which is, I mean, there's still a lot of data coming. And literally, like you and I both are aware of this significant spike that our local area, our
Yeah,
counties have experienced recently. So I think the data is yet to come, at least that I'm aware of. I think many children that probably had COVID and never been tested.
exactly.
You know
And
what I mean?
or had never had symptoms. We were talking before we
Exactly.
started recording. Our family, despite extreme caution, had COVID, and everyone had significant symptoms except for our youngest. But it's
Yeah.
it's made me think,
Yeah.
are some of these disruptions that I see with my own children a combination of change in schedule, change in environment, inconsistencies with life, and is the fact that they're recovering from the virus affecting them? So that will be
Yeah.
interesting for us to pay attention to moving
Yeah.
forward, and not, I think, not to dismiss the fact that that could be playing a role
Yeah.
for children's and teens, just like adults.
Yeah. I do have reports like when that folks like they had behavior disruptions and just meltdowns and those kind of things prior to maybe having a sniffle or a cold symptom that would end up being tested, and testing positive for COVID. I think there's the post-COVID kind of thing, whereas maybe there's more dysregulation that could be part of that. It makes sense that it could be. I do think everyone I know is still a little bit tired afterwards, but we're
Yeah,
at a place where even people who haven't had COVID are just tired. You know what I mean? There's a general, I would say there's many people are reporting just being tired kind of thing, a little bit of fatigue
yeah. Well,
more
and
than normal. Yeah.
I know I wear an Apple Watch and monitor my heart
Mhm.
rate when I exercise, and I'm still going through pretty intense physical therapy for a knee injury. And something that I've
Mhm.
had to work with my therapist is my heart rate spiking
Yeah.
immediately after starting activity. There's no
Yeah.
gradual buildup. It's just
Yeah.
super high.
So I want to share some resources because one of the resources is our cranial sacral therapist, who you can reach out to. She's local and she does some virtual work, but it's physical-language.com. And she's been really wonderful and really helping understand that response. COVID, and this is where I'm talking out of my wheelhouse, but what I understand better is from someone sharing who has better language and all of
Yeah,
that. But really, of course, it's going to impact your heart.
of
And
course.
when we have something that impacts our heart, even when our body's maybe still healing or whatever like that, and having their process of healing, which you have acute healing, and then you have the longer term kind of healing where we're coming back to ourselves or our baseline. Um, there, when we experience something, and I mean, look at everything around COVID is fight or flight, right? Like people are dying from this, and so getting something with everything that is known about it can put you in a survival
Correct.
response. And so coming out of this, like let's be really let's use our trauma language if that's is that okay?
Yeah,
Like
sure.
this is a trauma.
Absolutely. It's a
This
trauma.
is a trauma. This is a trauma. And so this is, I mean, you can even call this chronic or even, this is a complex, like, because the duration is really long. And so coming out of that, of course, there's the physiological piece that I think you're referencing
Yeah.
when you start to exercise and your heart rate just boom, kind of thing. But I think there's also this we have had for how much, whatever the time when we first started learning about COVID, this kind of death association. And so when it actually comes to visit your home, there is just a massive amount of fear.
Sure.
I would say it's very similar to being in a very serious car accident.
Absolutely.
And so it
And so
takes
many
time.
people either have actually had someone in their family die or know someone who have died. has died.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm not the counselor or the trauma specialist, but
Yeah.
I think you're right that it is a
Yeah.
trauma response, and it's legit in some ways.
Yes.
If it's
So
become real to your family, it's not imaginary.
Right. So when we kind of have that kind of approach, imagine what that's like to leave your house.
Yeah.
Or to, begin, say you have immunity or you got the vaccine or however people are feeling comfortable to re-engage with even just their slightly outside of the house community, there is going to be fear. This is like, when someone has a serious car accident, getting back in a car
Mhm.
is going to cause some stress.
Right.
And me needing support. And I think let's be gracious and kind and understand that we're going to have some of that stuff collectively.
Yeah.
We're going to have that. And
Give
is that
ourselves some time to reacclimate. Understand that
absolutely
it's okay to press a pause button and go in slow.
I don't know about for you, but I know when they returned those kids to school came out, that was too fast for most people for their brains to be okay with. That was way too fast. And I know everybody's doing the best they can with what they have. I don't envy any administrator or anything, but that was one of those things when we've had this message for so long, the response, you could see the fear and the survival, like this is life or death. And now you want me on a dime to be right back with 30 kids or whatever it might be.
Right. Exactly. So I guess one question we got a lot from parents is, it is normal to expect that children and adults will have reactions. And it is normal to expect that we should give ourselves some grace and some time to process that. But how do we figure out what is normal response to this monumental change, and when it's sort of edges into that atypical response where we know they need professional help? How can we tell?
Um, so that where I'm very holistic, and the interventions that I advocate for, not all of them involve professional people. You know what I mean? Because minimum effective dose is kind of where I'm at. And we also find that people feel honored and valued, and there's a lot of research that supports that. So I think when we're talking about anxiety and loneliness and my belly hurts and I can't sleep, um, there's somewhere, I think for sleep, somewhere at 6 hours or less, it's time to get help. I think for anxiety, if you can't leave the house, it's time for help. Or even, and this is where if you're brainstorming and saying, hey, let's do this, this, or this. And it is also, there's ages here that are going to be different answers kind of thing for this. If someone is having suicidal thoughts or feeling hopeless, even this is where they don't actually want to die, but there's just, I just need this to end. I can't stand living like this. There's more, I don't even know what to call that. But anyways, you know what I'm saying? The worthless thoughts, like we don't want it to go past that. I mean, we don't even want them to be there, but we don't let it go into the having that, I want to die. I wish I wouldn't hear. Well, let's not go into where their brain starts thinking up a plan, because that is how inflamed and stressed out they are. And nobody wants this, or they're already in so much pain here. Let's address it here. I think the other people, if my only, I think if the kid, if we're thinking about with kids, and this is probably more maybe late elementary, junior high, high school, if their only relationships are virtual, that's time to get some help. You know what I mean? Or social media based, or people that they don't know in real life, as in they can't FaceTime with even, or they aren't part of the parent community as well.
Yeah.
Like they have to be, like, relationships have to be real. You and I both know, as we do a little bit on social media, it's just not the same as real life.
No,
it's not even close. And we don't want because literally there is such a message that, I don't have Snapchat, but when I've heard how that goes together, where there's literally a conversation that's pre-recorded, set up and did up. It's like a production. And then that's sent out for whatever, that it's like we
But
need to
social
have a,
media is its whole, we could have you come for a whole conversation on social media, because I will tell you, you can look at a lot of teenagers' social media and you'll think, oh, they have so many friends. And the reality
not
is,
real.
each of those kids may have one or two real people that they call when they're in a problem.
Yeah.
You know, but to
Yeah.
the world, they're very popular or supported, or, and so that perception is hard for kids who
Yeah.
don't think they have that. And
Yeah.
they feel very alone.
And so we're comparing real with an artificial
Yeah, it's
look.
fake.
Yeah.
So are you saying that one of the signs of knowing when to get them help is if they do not have a friendship that we would qualify as real, which might be different to every kid in some way, but someone, an actual person and that they know in their real circle of life that they could call on with a problem? Would that be a fair way to define that?
Well, we would use more palatable language for the hearer.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
how you're right. Yes. Yeah. No, I'm just thinking any junior high or even late elementary, oh, your friends aren't real, so we need to get you help. No, we wouldn't say it like that.
Right.
But it's one of those pieces where, we want you to, like, literally, what are the components of healthy human existence? Outside, real food, community, where you literally are playing with other kids that aren't exactly your age typically, but there's some, 2 years up, 2 years down, whatever kind of thing.
Right.
And sometimes your age, there's adults around, and the social media does not offer that. Like, there isn't that. There are not adults around. I mean, I could just go into that, but
But for some families, in person is still not an option for whatever reason.
Yeah. Which, you and I probably could put our heads together on this. How have you allowed, your teens are a little older than my teen and younger kids. We've done FaceTime and we've done, larger little Zoom things.
So
and then we visited outside a lot.
Not to use the real friend language again, but FaceTime with an actual human that they know, not a bot, in this circumstance would count.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because look at you and me. I could stick my tongue out at you and you can see that. You can see normal human interactions here.
I can read your nonverbal cues.
Exactly.
Which you can't do through typing.
And you also can literally see that I'm not perfect and you're a real human and not perfect. We're gorgeous ladies, obviously, but we're just, we're gritty. Both of you, we were very active within the past hour, both of us.
Yes, we both have our workout clothes on. For better, for worse, we show up vulnerable for each other. Right. Yeah, so we want our kids to be doing the same. What I'm hearing you say.
Nobody should have to get polished up for something like that. And I'm aware that is something going on, especially in that junior high school for sure.
Okay. Those are all good answers. So my next question I've been thinking about a lot during this pandemic, and I'm so happy to be able to ask you it, because I think I've seen in my own parenting, and in some ways, maybe I'm susceptible to this if I take a hard look in the mirror in some ways. I hope not in all ways, but I think for better or worse in America, we have a tendency to label kids early on by identifying them by their hobby or interest. You're an athlete, you're a musician, you're an artist, you're a scholar, you're a tech whiz. And suddenly, on a dime, the pandemic took all of those activities away or seriously altered them. And I've just found myself wondering if children and teens are struggling with their identity and if that's adding to their anxiety and depression. If I am this and then this is suddenly gone, what am I? Who am I? And so I'm just curious your thoughts on this. And, we have these conversations in our house about trying to instill and discover, because they're still very much in a discovery phase, who they are versus what they do. And I'd love your tips on moving kids in that direction and fostering that healthy development.
So, I'm going to start with adult and go back because this is kind of powerful. And we as adults, and I know most of your listeners are probably adults, correct?
I think this one will get some teens too, but yes, mostly adults.
Well, super. So there's even of us as we, part of part of our stressors and, the things that have called us to grow are realizing that I'm not just a wife, or I'm not just this, or we have career changes, or we have roles and families and different things like that. And all of these identities that are somewhat external, they can change. And so part of what we, and this is something that we want to call everybody to, and this is part of our emotional development, even as adults, because we just never stop developing, is to really ground into who we are. And that's a more internal thing, not external. And so just for an examples, valued, that we are loved, that we're good enough, that we matter, that we have power. I mean, we don't have complete control, but we have power. We can make choices. We have power. We're worthy. We can have joy. We can do good. There's so many pieces, and being anchored into a community. And this is this part where we have, you have this beautiful family. I get to, eavesdrop on at times where how much have the adults in your life influenced you and really mentored you and loved you along. Those pieces are part of who we are. And it's not about you being a PT, is it? No, this is you, who you are. You're valued, you're loved. You have all these folks that have been, surrounding doing that. And here, as caregivers, we want to make sure all of our kids really are getting that message. And so I do see it as part of development. You know what I mean? As a part of that long process of individuation and becoming adults, there is this kind of process of struggling with who am I? Why am I here? Who am I? What am I going to do? What do I want to be when I grow up? All those pieces. And people, kids do, try on things. They try sports. They try, a bunch of things. You listed a great list. And nowadays people are trying on genders and different things like that. Where even 20 or 30 years ago, there was less of that. But this is just part of people really trying to work into that process of who am I? And so that's typical. And we don't want to say that's not typical, but as our children are in this process, we want to have them held in those core, really, those core expectations or values. I don't even know what they are. You are loved. You matter. You have value. You're worthy. All of those core pieces. We want that couched. We want to hold that no matter where they're at, no matter what identity they're trying on at that time, holding in that, because that's the one that provides safety. It's enduring. And those are pieces that really can't change. Somebody can reject me and I can still be loved because, I'm anchored in. I have me.
Right.
And that's something that, we get our security as kids. We get our security from our caregivers. And
Right.
as we're individuating into adulthood, we are more and more to be grounded into ourselves for that security. And it's when we're not and don't have the support, we kind of to do that transition, that we have some more vulnerabilities with relationships and identity and all of that. And so that kind of grounding in what is truth. And even when I know people, it's individuating, launching into adulthood it's a difficult process.
It is. And I think learning early on, I am worthy even when I am not achieving or performing
Yes.
or succeeding. Who am I? I am I say to my kids, yes, you are a dancer, you are a student, but more importantly, you are funny, you are thoughtful, you are someone who shows up, you are a leader. You can be 90 years old and those things will still be true about you.
Yeah.
Even when you can't spin across a stage and leap up into the air, what is enjoyable and fun and temporary, and what is who you are. Those are different things.
Yeah. And here, when we're talking about these pieces, we're really talking about someone's essence, like mattering. Is there ever a time that anyone really just doesn't matter? You know what I
No.
mean? And that's to themselves. You know what I mean? Is there ever, it's essence, anytime that someone's really, we all might have bad behaviors, but we're not bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's these pieces. We might have moments of powerlessness, but our essence isn't powerless. And so those things, and so we're not the core grounding is about essence versus performance. Maybe that's probably what
Yeah.
I'm shooting for.
So beyond like, having conversations with kids who are old enough to comprehend this, which is a little bit of an abstract topic,
Yeah.
and just reminding them in daily practice,
Yeah.
is there anything else we can or should be doing, or is that the best way to handle that identity situation when so
Yeah.
much of what they did identify as their identity is suddenly gone?
Yeah. I do think that. And I mean, this is a skill that I think, it's a skill that I think many of us as parents, it just
Still,
kind of comes.
well,
You
even
can,
ourselves, we're still dealing. I mean,
yeah,
myself a lot of adults still have to come back to the center of that at different points
yeah.
in their life.
And, I encourage if people are parents or if someone's a parent and listening, are there times when they sense that their kid is feeling that they don't matter? Well, those are the times to just kind of speak it to them. You do matter. You're really important. I'm so glad you're here. You are a precious gift, whatever it might be. If you sense that they did something wrong or someone thought they did something wrong and they're feeling really low about that, we're just speaking that to them. You're not bad. You are not bad. Even when you mess up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not bad.
Well,
Does that?
yeah, and we tried, our kids are busy teenagers with full schedules, and suddenly it was gone. And
Yes.
we tried to shape that into, this could be a gift. You have time to discover things you might want to learn or want to experience that you didn't have time to do before.
Yeah.
What might you be interested in? What have you wanted to try that we could do at home that you didn't have time for? My oldest is like, if we go on one more hike, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, our family hikes so much, and they may hate hiking for the rest of their life, or puzzles, like it's like enough.
Yeah.
But we tried to like do it as a discovery phase of, you're so busy all the time. This is silence that you can grow from. But
Yeah.
I would say they probably argued with that notion, but that is how we tried to frame it. So
So
anyway,
just how was it for your folks to kind of have some stillness? Was that a gift in the long run?
I think in some ways it was. I mean, they
Yeah.
weren't completely still for terribly long. They, even before they returned to school, they could return to dance with precautions, which was
Yeah.
good because, as we know, when
Oh,
your body moves, your mind is um,
yeah.
healthier, and so we were thankful for that. But I do think they rested more. They actually, ate better. We cooked more as a family. There were benefits, and I think most
Yeah.
people would
Yeah.
say they did feel some of that.
Yeah.
So
Good. Very good.
the other thing that I'm hearing from almost every parent I've talked to, in different ways, that reacclimation socially is tough, either for them as adults and or for their kids. I think it's a big deal for all of us. It could be argued that we already live in a time, Lacey and I talk about this a lot when we lecture about social emotional development, that we are so present with our children, whether you think that's good or bad or both. Our parents in years past weren't there to help negotiate things or navigate problems or deal with conflicts. We just kind of showed up and did it by
Yeah.
ourselves, and it wasn't always graceful, but we learned from it. This generation doesn't do that as much as we do. I'm not here to criticize that. I'm a parent of this
Yeah.
generation myself. But I feel like since they've had such longer periods of health, of isolation, that I'm personally seeing or hearing about some side effects of that in two ways. One, with anxiety of returning to school or social activities, because they're so out of practice. of interacting with peers. And also, sadly, I've seen or heard a great deal of avoidance or of problems or dealing with conflict or concerns in unhealthy ways, whether that be eating changes, substance abuse, poor choices with the way they handle texting or online behavior, or even cutting behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a very long and hefty question, so feel free to say
It is.
what you want. But I know this is one that affects almost every person that wrote to us.
Yeah. So this is re-acclimation. So I would hope that everyone had their family or friend or their person, because when the world, our country kind of shut down back in March, we kind of hung out for a little bit, and then we just kind of were like, okay, who is going to be, wash their hands and be reasonable, that we can trust. Really, it's a trust issue, right?
Right.
And just start, let's go out to the fire pit and have those folks, and we'll just have some space, and we all bring our own beverages versus
Right.
having the big cooler where we're touching the same stuff. And so I would really like to hope that so many families have done that. Pick your one or two folks that you connect with. Yeah, visit outside, and then still have some connection, because that's where I really do believe if that is not happening, there is going to be significant delays in our social development.
I think even with small amounts of that, going back to a classroom of 35 people where some aren't wearing their masks properly and some are,
Yes.
and some, were exposed to COVID, but they're still there. And that has been like, what, am I okay? Am I safe? Am I, should I, and even beyond the physical safety, which is important. And I don't want to downplay that. Specifically with this question, I'm talking about out of practice with managing social emotional exchanges and health in reference to others. Yeah.
Let's drill down on that, because if you're talking about, I think you and I may have discussed it at one point in our time. I don't want to be in a classroom with 30 people. I've seen the classrooms. That's really close. Yep. I'm not a big concert person, and that's just me. And I love that some people really can feel okay in that. But I can't imagine. Can you imagine going to a Dave Matthews concert in the next month?
My husband really misses Dave Matthews, but I told him, no. We talked about this the other day. If they open tomorrow, even though we're fully vaccinated and even though we have had COVID, I would still, the older I get, I just get more angsty about a bunch of crowds anyways, but
me too.
That's just me.
But close and a lot of people. So there is a reasonable expectation to have anxiety going from click to brick when there's 25, 30, I don't, depending on whatever the number of folks in the classroom.
A lot.
Especially when kids have been exposed to so much, like, oh my gosh, if so-and-so doesn't have their mask just right, I might not be okay. So that's a reasonable expectation to have anxiety about those things. And that's, time will tell. I mean, that's what kind of always is, if their biggest fear is, am I going to get COVID? Or is someone else going to, and that's something that individually would want to drill down on, kind of thing. Yeah. What's the big fear there? I think there's a lot of kids in one classroom, period.
But are they, like, with these behaviors, with eating changes and cutting and trouble, I see a lot of trouble with kids communicating with each other because they're out of practice with that. Do you see that in your practice? Do you see these behaviors and these, like, sort of unhealthy side effects? And if someone's seeing this with their kids, is the answer then, I guess, professional help?
Well, the first part is really engaging what's going on, really digging how are they identifying what the root issue there is. And so tell me, what age range are we talking about when you say difficult, out of practice communicating?
More with teens.
Okay.
they're upset with something, instead of dealing with problems directly, they're either not, they're harming themselves in some way or making
Yeah.
unhealthy choices for themselves, or, indirectly hurting others.
Yeah. Let's talk about cutting first. Let's kind of make sense out of that.
Okay.
So cutting happens when people are so emotionally overwhelmed that actually feels better than what they're actually feeling inside.
So hard
Yeah.
to imagine, but I know it's so
Yeah.
real and so prevalent.
So cutting, most people who cut do not want to die. That's not their intention. It is serious because there's accidental kind of, what happens. There's, if teens are listening, they probably could tell you more about that. I don't want to go into blood and different things like that, but there's other pieces that we could talk about on a more individualized kind of way. But that's a flag that says professional help, and just, having that, I care about you, I love you. Let's go together, talk to somebody. I always encourage parents, if you're going with your teen to a counseling session, your job's to talk 25% of the time.
Oh,
No
that's
more.
great advice.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
That's their session. And then if you have something that you need to say, that's safety and all these pieces. I mean, and this is going to range with age. It's going to flex out with age, but I'm particularly with teens. If there's something you really need to say, I mean, reach out to the agency outside of that session. That's their time, and they need that voice. They're in excruciating amount of pain. And so trying to do that, and I mean, parents love their kids. I've just never, even in some awful situations, parents still love their kids. They were stressed out and, just not able to manage well. So it really kind of, people know you love your kids. I've never worked with other providers that didn't think parents love their kids all the time, literally. But know that isn't about your support. I know how stressing that can be to parents. And that's where it might be for parents to get whatever support they
Their
need.
own tools. Their own.
Exactly. So it doesn't come into that session for the kid, because that kid needs to know that this is their time.
So just to clarify, if we're seeing severe eating changes, self-harm behavior, substance abuse, dangerous behavior online,
Yes.
that's a time where there's your flag. You don't have to wait for anything else. You need to access help.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And in other, maybe nothing is less significant. So that's not the word I want to use, but maybe less dangerous, less immediately dangerous things. It may be getting to the root of what is the problem that's bothering you. Let's talk through this together, being available and letting them know that you see something and that you want to help.
Yeah. Yeah. And approaching that with warmth and love and care and concern. Let's clarify eating changes. We had a definite spike of young adults and teens with eating changes. And there are a lot of people, that was a temporary response. Many of the folks never had issues with that before. One of those short term, hopefully, and some of them are still working it out, response to just a massive loss of control. I mean, and I, there may be other factors with that, from nutrition, changes in nutrition, which is upsetting. When the more we eat out, the more dysregulated our gut is.
Sure.
The less nutrition we have, the less good material our body has to make good neurotransmitters, and also to support our immune system. So there's all these pieces with that. So when I want to clarify, if your teen decided to do, was kind of just laying around in the beginning, I felt like they gained a little weight, and they want to do something about that. We don't want to call that an eating change. We want to call something that makes us concerned is significant weight loss that puts somebody in a risk category. And some folks have, done a significant weight loss, and that was actually really beneficial for them. They had the time, and maybe going to school was actually way more stressful than they realized, that their body, was able to focus on eating real food and different things. And they were able to get outside and move their body and get some, whatever it is that people whatever is that situation where they actually feel better. And that is an eating change that actually is beneficial, but it's an unhealthy eating change that you're seeing negative effects physically and emotionally. Like if you're looking for sadness, almost all the time or a lot of the time, staying away from other family members or friends connection all the time on social, or even just, I don't know. I think sometimes 20 minutes is too much on social. And I'm speaking as an adult, so I don't know what that's going to translate to for a teen that's going to be reasonable. And I'm not a hard and fast. I'm kind of a gray
but you're
shade
talking
person.
about eating changes that put them underweight,
A lot of food, a lot of restriction,
or unhealthy emotions about food, fear of overeating, avoidance of extreme avoidance of certain kinds of foods.
Yeah.
Over exercise is good. You're never going to hear a physical therapist tell you not to exercise, but
there's over exercise,
those sorts of things would lead you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also diuretics and the what are the laxatives, those kind of using those things to dysregulate.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've heard a lot of parents say, I really think my kid needs a counselor. I don't know how to bring it up without feeling interrogated. So these questions can kind of go together. How do we approach that without them feeling interrogated? If the child refuses to go or feels weird about it, should we make them go if we know they absolutely need help?
Okay. There's some age things that are going to be unique here, but I'll just kind of go pretty general. Obviously, if our 6-year-olds need help, a 6-year-old's going to have a parent in session with them, and they're part of that. 14, 17, 18, 19, still in high school, those kind of things. This is where we're going to reach out. We're going to really connect with them. And so I call this making an effective request. There are various versions out there, but effective request is something to the effect of, I care about you, I love you, kind of thing. And then you do, I feel afraid, or whatever the feeling, I feel afraid that you're in so much pain. And I mean, we got to label, a lot of our kids don't have words for the emotional pain they're experiencing. I feel afraid that you're in so much pain. I need to help you address that. Would you please come with me to meet with somebody? And I love you. And I would feel guilty if I didn't reach out to you on this, if I didn't address this.
And just to kind of, so a teenager, it's hard to make a teenager do anything. Let's just start there.
Yeah.
But if there's substantial concerns for mental health and safety, should a parent let's say you say that to your kid and they're like, I'm not going. Should you say, we're going?
If this is a safety issue, you're going. It's like, I would feel guilty if I didn't press this. I mean, your life's more important.
Different than your blood sugar is low, so we're going to the ER, or you broke a bone, so I'm taking you to get it cast.
Yeah. Your life is more important than me being upset that you're pissed at me because I'm insisting that you get support.
That's good.
That's where it's life or death. The other piece, that this is the time where I know teenagers, we really want them to regulate themselves, but they still need us just in different ways as parents. And so this is one of those pieces. And let's just say it hasn't hit the full on life or death, where there's maybe suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts, or cutting behaviors, or something where there's like a serious risk. This is just a moderate risk. I need this, because if we don't address, I would feel guilty if it got any worse without you having this intervention. I would consequence. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You can be mad at me, but sometimes I have to be the parent.
Absolutely. I have to be the parent. You have parents.
A lot of success and with willingness to get help for teens or older children when they can access a counselor through telehealth or these texting services. I've seen those advertised online. And are those good? Are those bad? What do we think about that?
I love this question, because we had seen those too, and we put together some teen groups that were virtual. We have HIPAA protected Zoom version of HIPAA,
Yes.
and no takers. And really, they got down to the root is so many of our teens have been really violated through media, video, that kind of thing, that there's like, no, I don't know if we have any folks in our center who are doing more than a session or two when, say, the whole center is closed for testing or something like that, because that's happened a couple of times. It's been very short-lived. They really want in person.
These
And
are
and here, I don't think testing is therapy. I'm just going to put it out there. That
okay.
is not therapy. And it's one of those pieces that so many of the components of what happens in therapy cannot be translated in a text. Now, can there be information? Can there be information and resources shared? Absolutely. But to call that therapy would be a stretch. And so, I would be curious to see what that actually would look like. But we've just not had
some
takers.
services where, as a parent, you can give background information. Your child can have an in-person not in person, but virtual evaluation with a therapist, and then a once a week like telehealth check-in. But then in between sessions, they can leave messages or texts for the therapist to communicate between sessions. I don't know anything about them. I just wonder if the reason why I asked the question is, I think if it is a step, I was curious if it was a step way into therapy for a child who was resistant or felt odd about seeing a therapist, if maybe they saw the benefit of something, if maybe they would be more willing.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. We just didn't have any takers. We just didn't. So, I mean, that's just maybe our experience. It doesn't mean that that's across the world. So I'd be curious if somebody, hopefully someone will share
if anyone's listening and they've had this service. I've seen it advertised for adults too, like betterhelp.com and those places. Yeah. I'm just curious if people find that effective, or if we have any listeners who have done traditional therapy in person versus that, if they have any feelings about it, it'd be interesting. So one specific question came in, and it was, as a mom of a clinically depressed teen who has had suicidal ideations prior to the pandemic, other than meds and extensive therapy, what resources are available to assist me in helping him navigate the pandemic? And I feel for this mom, because I can imagine this was hard enough before COVID. And now this has to be very hard. It sounds like she's doing a lot already, which is great. But do you have any feelings about that?
Yeah. What resources are available? So say the mom is. So I would reach out local therapy. Ask your friends, like who is somebody that they find reputable. Look for folks who are not, because if someone has anxiety, they're definitely going to need some nutrition support. At Renovo, we have we sublease to a nutritionist who is trauma informed and wonderful. We have yoga therapy, art therapy, and all of these trauma interventions and CBT.
What about acupuncture? Can you talk about the acupuncture for a minute?
Yes. So ear acupuncture is just what we're able to do as therapists, and really it's called an acu-detox because it's a stress detox. So this is, if you think about acupuncturists without borders, any natural disaster, they go out, set their canopies up and help folks who when there's a trauma that occurs, our central nervous systems are dysregulated. And sometimes we can get stuck in that survival response. And so the ear acupuncture in particular is wonderful and part of that. So reaching out, then there's a multitude of places, even some places in Martinsburg and Jefferson County, both that do acupuncture, like the whole deal. And also ear acupuncture. Some places are free for the ear acupuncture.
And to clarify, the ear acupuncture, because we have listeners really that we even have international listeners. So we have people that are listening all over. But the ear acupuncture specifically, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correct myself too when I recommend this to people. It helps regulate the nervous system after it's been dysregulated from a stress situation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it also helps our body move toxins, which that's part of stress and our body being inflamed kind of thing. Yeah. So there's just 5 points, and the needle is the size of a shaft of hair. So it's really tiny. Sometimes people feel a little bit like a bee sting or something, and other times people don't feel the pin going in. And so people will, the practitioner will insert the pins, and people can have no pins in either ear or do all 10, 5 in each ear, or they can do beads or seeds if they're not a pin person. And then they just kind of hang out. It's something we typically do in groups. And here the research shows that even the people who don't have the pins in their ears or the beads and seeds have the same outcomes as the people who do. So this is where our mirror neurons are kind of linking up with one another.
Oh, I love it.
The shift that the folks with the treatment have transmits to those who didn't.
What are beads and seeds?
We use little silver pellets that are on it, a little adhesive, or radish seeds. I'm not remembering the word they use for radish seeds, but anyways, they just go on the same points, and there's a little adhesive
point from the weight of it.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And then the wearer can press on those gently a couple times a day, or when they're feeling stressed.
Okay. No, I didn't tell you ahead, so I was going to ask you this question, but I feel comfortable asking it because I know you know so much about it, and I'm just wondering, as a resource for this mom or for other moms, can you just quickly touch on emotional brain training? Are you still doing that?
Absolutely. Every session. And one of the things that's been so interesting, Nicole and I were just talking about, like, the pandemic has just slammed mental health. And we were kind of dealing with an epidemic before with substance misuse and the fallout around substance misuse around that person as well. And so this has just compounded all of this. And so the folks that are coming in for therapy just are ready to work, going. I mean, it's like they're just hitting the ground running and doing just beautiful work. So emotional brain training, you can learn more about it at EBT, Emotional Brain Training Connect.net, EBTconnect.net. And it's really where you're learning stress processing skills that help us not get stuck in stress, and really over time rewire how our brain processes stress. So, Nicole, we were talking a little bit earlier about, how do those teens and their identities, and, how do we do that? We ground into our essence. What is our essence? And so say we have, a wire where someone rejects us and say, oh, I'm not lovable, kind of thing might be what it feels like. And so having the tools and skills to rewire that and really have encode in the brain, I am lovable, the opposite, which is actually true.
But it's with biofeedback, correct?
It's not.
Okay.
Yeah. We've had neurofeedback. We've had neurofeedback in our center, and we've had, actually at one point we had 3 suites of neurofeedback, 3 systems of neurofeedback. And COVID we're not even doing that right now because it requires us to be pretty close. And that is
future reference for people. That's when they're receiving visual feedback, correct? Of their
it's visual and auditory feedback there. So use an EEG amplifier and just have the conduction paste attaches some electrodes and just picks up the brain waves and transmits them on the screen using visual and auditory sounds. And so what neurofeedback does is train the brain to stay in that zone that we have it programmed for. And then it sounds less pleasing, and the visual is less pleasing and less clear as the brain waves are going outside of that training zone.
The therapists that listen to this will be all about learning more about that, because, PTs, OTs, and speech therapists, speech language pathologists will use, I know in some form, I know specifically about PTs who use biofeedback in different ways. And so that will be interesting for people to and learn, because it's pretty effective, correct? When you're allowed to do it pre-COVID times.
Yeah. Yeah. The system we use is really just a lot of wonderful research supporting it. And it's expensive. I've looked at Apollo, and there's a couple other ones that are kind of individualized and handheld, and they're a finite kind of, they don't quite have the high level of clinical pieces that you can do with it, but they have really decent research, and there's more to come.
So maybe
I'm
a parent who is already doing some things, that might be another option.
Yeah. But just to give you kind of a hierarchy, there, if someone has anxiety in particular, like it's perfectly if they're not having suicidal ideations, it's perfectly acceptable to start with nutrition.
Okay.
Seeing a nutritionist to help with that process. It's if when people have isolation issues, you can do little things like, okay, we're just going to get together. And look, we've had a hard time as adults. Like, is it reasonable to expect our kids to just figure this out? No, they're going to need some intervention and some help. And so whether it's, my kids are struggling, so I'm going to call Nicole and say, hey, Nicole's coming over, and we're going to have a couple of the friends come over, and we're going to do some group activity. We call it team building. We can call it whatever, community building. We're just going to play together and have some games. And whether it's something that ends up looking really similar to a youth group activity, or I'm trying to think of some of the different things that go on at high schools and junior highs. And it's going to be a social event, and we're just going to talk it through. But I do think it's really important that you've mentioned that, sometimes people are having a hard time with the communication piece. And it just kind of clicked for me. If people's interactions have only been on video or kind of social, when it comes to that, there can be just a lack, unfamiliar
out of
use
practice,
of those
right?
kind of skills.
I find that with my own friends, or not my own friends, my own kids with their friends, when there's conflict, there's sometimes texting, but no conversation. And I always tell them, if it's normal to have problems with people that you're in community with, and there's positive ways to handle it, and you must speak, because text can be interpreted so many different ways and so wrong, even when the intent isn't wrong. Pick up the phone or FaceTime someone and have a conversation. Sometimes I feel a little swimming upstream there, but I do think you're right that teenagers aren't in practice of verbally communicating.
Yeah.
Especially hard things.
This is something that is important for us to role play. We can role play with our kids. Say, hey, this, text me, let's practice this. And it always starts from a text. Hey, sounds like a phone call. And then, kind of, is it okay if I call you right now? Are you free? And having that scheduling almost, and just say, hey, I heard this, and I was going to make sure I'm not upset with you, or just play it out, role play it. Because remember, you're building pathways, and remember, your kids, especially if they already had some of those skills, they're going to come back pretty quickly. They just need a little support getting them re-engaged.
Well, I think pre-pandemic too, that's just good advice. I also, I've heard kids say, I'm worried about my friend. They seem like they're always upset, or I'm worried about my friend. They mentioned this to me. I'm worried about my friend. They're going through this with somebody at school, but don't tell their parent, or don't tell, they're so, rightfully, they want to be trusted by their friends. So this was actually a question from a teenager. If you know your friend isn't okay, what do you do?
Okay. So isn't okay versus on the level of safety, and isn't okay isn't good. You know what I mean? It can be unsafe too. So isn't okay, I say talk to your parents about it, see what you can do. Your parents may have some ideas, taking those back. And at some point, like, we're all like, one of the most important skills we're ever going to learn, I think, is limit setting. You know what I mean? It's because, this is one of those pieces where if you don't accept this help, I just can't sit here and watch you decompose, kind of thing.
Well, I wonder too if sometimes kids are doing this behavior so their friends will notice. So, like, I've even said to my kids, maybe you should say, I'm worried about you. Can we talk to your parents together? Or I'm worried about you. Do you mind if I tell your mom I'm worried about you? Or
well, I wouldn't ask permission to tell my mom about anything. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I would, cause that's something, but as a parent, if our kids come to us and their friend is, threatening suicide, has done, I mean, cutting, those are things where,
We need to get them help.
absolutely. And here, if they're not going to get help, or if they're really like passing out because of binging and or purging and all these other pieces and food restriction, that where like that's really, really unsafe. Anorexia does have one of the highest mortality rates in the mental health field.
Yep.
So there's some of these things, and suicide, the rates of teen suicide have skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So I think it's
And
like double the
is
rate.
it true? Is it true that we're seeing that in younger children too?
That's
Younger
what I'm
suicides?
reading. Yeah, that's what I'm reading. I'm not personally saying that, from what I'm experiencing in our center. But I mean, I think if the data is out there, the
Yeah,
data
they
is out there. I'm
track
not
it.
going to argue with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we've had this coming, we've before the pandemic, like teen suicides were climbing, and they had been climbing, I think, just in the past, is it 8 or 5 years? I forget exactly,
Well,
but
I know it's a long time because in our lecture that we do on play, when we talk about changes in play trends and how we've robbed children, even older children, of their ability to have free time for free play to manage stress, that is a consequence that they have linked to that change in societal behavior, that
yeah,
children aren't getting that blow off free. When we lecture, we say, when you're stressed, what do you do? Well, I call a friend, I go on a run, I
yeah,
but if their day is so scheduled and we don't give them a chance to make some choices
yeah,
for how to manage it, it bubbles over. And then of course, the pressure of school, college
yeah,
applications, scholarships, testing school.
yeah.
I mean, there's just so many these kids. It's hard to be a kid, and
There
everything
you
they
go.
do is tracked online if they have access to social media. So,
I
I tell my
know.
kids all the time, I'm so glad I didn't have social media when I was your age, because I messed up a lot, and
Yeah, me
you're
too.
going to too. So you just have to know it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
And you mentioned something. I think it's important for our kids and us as caregivers to model walking back our mistakes.
Hmm.
I messed up on that. I'm sorry. You don't deserve for me to speak to you like that. And even for teenagers to kind of like, because that could happen, and that could happen in a social media situation. And really, let's walk it back. You know what I mean? Let's talk about that. I realized what I said was wrong. This was not the context, but how do you do repair? How do you express genuine sorrow for what you did? And this is a powerful
Life
relationship
skill.
skill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, coping strategies for kids and teens who are struggling with that anxiety, feeling lonely, having trouble falling asleep. Um, what can we suggest to them to help cope? You've mentioned nutrition.
Okay.
We've talked about
Yes.
exercise. We've talked about parent present, friend present. So being in connection with other people
Mm-hmm.
who love them. Anything else we've
Mm-hmm.
missed in terms of coping strategies?
Okay. And I mean, I think I'll drill down on talk about sleep, but some of these all are going to be beneficial. And
Okay.
I gotta just put a plug in for the Whoop strap. Like, do you
Yeah,
know what I'm
talk
talking about?
about
You know what
that.
a Whoop strap is?
I looked it
Okay.
up when you shared the other day, but tell the people.
So how we really appreciate our team of clinicians and support staff at Renovo, and this is hug your healthcare provider.
That's hard
They have
times.
been
Yeah.
through it this past year, and doing treatment virtually was just so stressful and such a transition. It was a hard left turn for many of us who just had never done this work that way. So we really really value self-care, and really it's a core value, literally.
Love that.
So what we've done is we've offered to reimburse for up to 6 months of the Whoop strap. It's about $30 a month for our team members. And what the Whoop strap does, it doesn't have a face on, which I think is so interesting, but it tracks your resting heart rate. It has your sleep numbers, HRV, respiratory rate, and all these pieces. And it gives you a strain score for how hard you can deal with stress or workouts, because a lot of professional athletes and collegiate athletes and all that, but we're seeing that corporate world and entrepreneurs and business leaders are using this as well. So it has a strain score because based on it has a recovery score, and then it has a sleep score. And so recovery looks at HRV, resting heart rate, respiratory rate, and your sleep score to give you a recovery score. And that tells you kind of how hard or how much stress your body and brain can deal with, because our brain's not going to differentiate physical and emotional stress. And this really can help us kind of look about, because we tend to do the same thing every day, but the truth is that we need to kind of take it easy some days, and other times, especially if we're talking about a physical workout, we can go hard kind of thing. And so I thought this would be just this really objective metric that we can look at. And we're about 5 weeks in. I am just fascinated by the data. You know what I mean? I'm just fascinated by the data. So some of the things that I want to talk to you about with sleep kind of comes from, stuff we've talked about before, but there's other things that I just didn't know until I start finding out, what their data, they're just a big data collection kind of piece of what helps people have higher HRV, heart rate variability, have a lower resting heart rate at night, have better sleep scores. And so I'm just want to start listing the things that I've seen make a big difference. The blue light blocking glasses, especially if people can't not have screen time 3 hours before bedtime. My favorites, which are from Lenovo, are like magnesium glycinate. And that's something that we give for anxiety during the day. We take bedtime.
Say it
magnesium.
Again. Sorry. Magnesium.
Sure. Glycinate.
Magnesium. Glycinate.
Yeah. Glycinate. That's it. Glycinate.
Okay.
And some, we don't recommend more than 3 milligrams of melatonin, but sometimes folks at bedtime will find those two paired together to be really their magic combination. Weighted blankets. Like you talk about changing my sleep score. Oh my gosh, the weighted blankets have been huge. Not having meals. Yeah. My son's had one for years, but I didn't actually try it on until like more recently. And I was like, oh, and look at my sleep score. So you have this objective metric that just shows, not eating 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. That changes the restorative process of sleep. Having really close to similar bedtime and wake times are other things that really impact that recovery number, which gets the higher your heart rate goes in that overnight process and the lower your resting heart rate, that helps that with the restorative process. So
those are great.
Yeah. Having sun time a little bit every day, having time in nature, like being up before a certain time, and you guys decide what that is, but I'd say, being up before 7:30 in the morning, is there something great about it? I know we have teens, so whatever your number is, teenagers, I get that you guys.
Mine are up at 5:45.
Oh dear, God bless them. But we know that's, how many, I'm sure there's a ton of families I've heard this whole past year that the circadian rhythms got way off, in particular for their teenagers. And that would be one of those pieces where get their circadian rhythms back to what nature is. It makes a huge difference, especially if folks are starting to have mental health symptoms.
What about journaling?
I think that can be helpful. And, I think that can be very helpful. Don't do it online.
Yeah.
Do it in a way that's safe. I think many people will do it on the computer. That's different. But I'm saying something, I think it needs to, if people are going to journal, it needs to be something that's pretty private so they can feel safe in their processes. I think that's wonderful. Hey, I'm a huge fan at bedtime of doing what we call emotional house cleaning. Is where we kind of go through and finish the sentence, and really we're just clearing feelings. So we check in with our pain feelings. So we say, I feel angry that, and kind of see what comes up and finish the sentence with just simple words. And then we go through, I feel angry, sad, afraid, guilty, and then grateful, happy, secure, and proud. So it's kind of a balancing thing, but you're clearing out the stress of the day And that's really good for monkey mind and
I
some of those
want you
pieces
to
of
send
bedtime.
me that, and I'm going to make that into a graphic for me and for you.
Okay, and
for
that's emotional.
everybody.
Yeah,
I love
that's straight. That is straight from the ebtconnect.net team.
Okay.
I mean, that is a tool that I learned from them. They're one that's yeah.
I
The
love
other
that.
piece is really belly breathing that we haven't mentioned. And this is like, how do we wind down and get to sleep? Belly breathing is huge. And engaging that diaphragmatic breath is really engaging our calming system of our central nervous system. If belly breathing doesn't feel right, those are good times to engage your craniosacral therapist that works with your spinal fluid, which is very much connected to your central nervous system. So those are those external resources that really complement well with, all the professionals. Some folks really need to see their medical doctor if they haven't had a physical in the past year. Teens, do they have thyroid? Are they on birth control? Are they having hormone dysregulation? There's a bunch of different pieces that can be with that, but I don't want to, there's a bunch of,
that's important.
The whole person.
Those are important to look outside the box of just, you're stressed and you can't sleep. There's a lot of things to be adding to that maybe we're not thinking of. Yeah, I love that. I love objective stuff. I like a list, and that is a great list. Okay, so last question. You've been so gracious with your time. Younger children, we work with younger children, Lacey and I do, as you know. And I've heard from, it's interesting, when we do our annual evaluations, we kind of go through family routines and we say, okay, how is waking up going? How's mealtime going? How's playtime going? How's bath time going? And when we get to outings, we're like, how are outings going? And we've heard parents say, well, we don't go anywhere. And when we do, to be honest with you, they're kind of freaked out by people, because it's a really weird thing to think about, but especially 1-year-olds, babies that just turned 1, they haven't really been out. They have not seen other humans very much other than their family. So we on our end are noticing some unique stranger anxiety things, because they don't have a reference of before pandemic, because they weren't here before pandemic. We had one. So I'm curious about tips for picking up on things that are off in younger children. And to illustrate that, we had one example of a listener who wrote to us about her son, who is 6, and he does have some history of anxiety and OCD. She's seeing a regression with toilet training, only just at home though. He's fine at school. Anxiety with going to school, disinterest in activities that he used to love, like going outside. His mom's gut says to her that he's trying to control something because so much has been out of his control in the past year. And we talked about that with eating and other behaviors for older kids too. So is this common, would you say, in younger children? For that mom in particular, any advice, or just for parents in general of younger children, signs to watch for, because they're not going to be as verbal in potentially sharing their worries?
That there just sounds like some uniqueness with that particular situation. I wonder if that sweet child had a hard time with transitions to starting school and ending,
Maybe.
That kind of thing as well. I don't know. You and I've done this for a while. Our mamas know what their kids need, don't they? She has a gut feeling about something there that I think is really valid and should be explored.
That he's controlling.
And so, and maybe he is. I mean, and is it reasonable that he would need to control something? Because a lot of things have just been, you're in school one week, you're not the next.
Control.
Right. And so providing ways, and maybe they need professional support. My gut goes towards occupational therapy in this particular situation kind of thing, but maybe a counselor, behavioral specialist or something on that line would be helpful too. But the kind of saying, what are the things, does this child have things that they can control, that they, the other part is our kids save all their difficulty for their caregivers. You know what I mean? They save it all for you.
Yeah.
Where they feel safe. And so they may be just holding it together all day and then coming home Is there some gut dysregulation? Are they having, bouts of diarrhea? Are they fearful about using the bathroom at school? There's a ton of questions there. And that I feel like I'm probably not able to help very much because I have more questions than answers.
Yeah.
With
Without
that, but
specific case. But for young children, you're saying, I'm hearing body systems, look at digestion, look at sleep, look at behavior that's out of the norm. It sounds like, disinterest in things he used to love. Those,
yeah,
she's on the right track that he needs help.
yes,
But for a parent in general, if they're seeing those things, I wonder too, like, I'm a big fan of social stories, and I know that OTs are a huge help with that. But, you know, I was talking to my cousin, I sent her a text. She has, um, I think he's 5, and then a 3-year old. And I said, "How are they doing? Like, have you noticed anything?" And she said, "Well, their daycare has been fairly consistent. So that routine hasn't changed for them. But the biggest routine for them was not seeing grandparents." And so her parents finally came to visit, and it was only a long weekend where previously they had stayed longer. And her kids really had a meltdown with the detachment from the grandparents,
yeah,
and
yeah,
had the grandparents had to promise they show when they were coming back and how long they would stay. And so I think those sorts of things in a young child's world have changed, and maybe social stories which spell out the
yeah,
expectation of what's going to happen or why it's going to happen to illustrate. I find those helpful for children, with learning challenges or developmental challenges, and children who don't have developmental
yeah.
challenges.
Well, one of the things, and I know that was very difficult for your cousin to have that, but that is a sign of really secure attachment.
Oh, for
Like,
sure.
you know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's beautiful. That's reasonable for kids to feel that loss
We feel it.
and yeah, and find ways to stay connected. I I haven't I've struggled with how much our kids know about COVID.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I don't, they have like how much is appropriate, and there's age ranges about, but knowing that the adults have been saturated with information, and a lot of it's not consistent, um and what so I think there's
Well, and we're
you
stuck
know
in
I
this weird place where we can't shelter them from it because
right, everybody's got a mask on.
everyone's in a mask and they can't see their grandparents. So to give them no explanation behind that feels
You gotta tell a story about that.
right. I was
Yeah,
doing some research on stress and children, for a course we're doing, and it kept coming back to basically, the Mr. Rogers theme, and looking for the helpers, and two things. One is, giving them real information that's developmentally appropriate, and also not giving it to them without empowering them with a way to control it. So, like,
hmm,
yes, there are a lot of people in the hospital, there are a lot of people are sick, so let's make cards for the nurses and doctors and respiratory therapists who
yeah,
are working so hard. Yes, we miss our grandparents, and guess what? They miss us too. Let's pick a time where we can read a story with them every night. Giving
yeah.
them some control over it or a piece and making it better in the research I read, um, showed to be healthy.
Yeah. And really trying to keep their knowledge very, very local or just around their family kind of thing. So they don't like, part
Overwhelmed.
of the issues. Yeah. The issues even as adults is we have all this information about the whole world. It's just too much.
Our
And
brains.
so especially exactly. And the truth is that we can love our neighbor and care for our community and the world and not have to know all these things. And that's the part where um, we do want our kids to be active with social justice and stuff like that. But we seriously need to question how we be very careful what ages we're doing that, and what doses we're doing that with, because
To
I
make sure
think they're when we
developmentally
know
responsible. Yeah.
absolutely, and they're not able to take on any responsibility with that other than in these small local ways kind of thing. this macro kind of world, or even just a state issue, you and I we're overwhelmed some of the time when we talk about this. I'm
Easily
like,
overwhelmed. Melissa,
yeah, like,
get me out of my cocoon of helplessness and empathetic responses on the fair regular.
yeah.
So I get it. So our last question, and this can be serious and related to your field, or it can be funny and totally unrelated to mental health, which maybe you need a break from that in the intensity you've served our world this past year. But the mic is yours. What do you want parents, teens, families to know that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah, parents, you guys are the most important people in your life. Take care of you. Everybody, you are the North Star of your family. And so your self-care matters, you matter. And so this, we don't need to be putting our kids, before us when it comes to these things where we're stressed out and all of that. So we want to regulate ourselves first. And then also our teens and our kids, I mean, they matter too. They're our world. They're one of the biggest joys in our lives. And so let's spend more time as a family. Let's do less. Let's have moments of stillness every day. Let's get out in nature. Let's kind of simplify. And I think we're going to make it through this for sure. And I think we're going to come out on the other side of this better in some ways, for sure.
Yeah,
definitely.
I hope so.
The other thing that I'm thinking, Nicole, I met you. You were my Pilates instructor.
I was.
I'm not sure exactly what year that would have been, but that was probably 17 or 18 years ago. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes. I would say so. I taught Pilates 9 months pregnant with Gabriella.
Yes. Yes.
And then a few years after that, until having kids so close together finally put a fork in me.
I think the last class I attended, you were pregnant with the second one.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Happened very close together. So yeah, it's all a blur. But yes.
Yeah.
That's how we met, was through Pilates.
I think that there's, whether it's through Zoom or other things, I think there's, this is a time where we can all continue to connect with each other in various ways more frequently. And I guess the other thing that I'm thinking, it is absolutely okay to have your 4 friends. I mean, as the older we get, we have fewer really close friends. 2 close friends are way better than,
for sure,
100, 200, 2,000, whatever it is, that are not close. And we all just wanted, I do think that for me, there's been some difficulty and some losses this past year. But one of the things that I do celebrate is some parts of my life have really slowed down. My relationships have deepened significantly.
Quality over quantity.
I'm deeply grateful for that. And so look for the light side of things, and trust that we are the human race, and we will continue.
Yeah. Melissa, how can people find you? I know how to find you. I send people your way, but what are the best ways? Your center is such a light in our community in so many ways around mental health, but also significantly around addiction and other concerns, whether someone is local or whether they just want to learn more about you, even if they're across the country or across the world. How can they find you?
Well, our website is renovocenter.com. That's RENOVO center.com. And you can reach out to me through email. It's melissa@renovocenter.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us. I feel like your cup is always pouring, and I know that this pour is going to mean a lot for a lot of people. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for all the good you do in this world too.
Thanks. If you have not yet followed our podcast or liked it, we ask if you'd be willing to do that. You consider it. It helps small podcasters like us to become more visible on the web. Also, if you're new to us, you can check us out anytime at milestonesandmiracles.com for a plethora of free information and our product 123 Just Play With Me, which makes a great baby gift. We are here to support and promote play as the best way for young children and families to stay healthy and happy. And so we thank you for your time and listening to us. Please feel free to share this conversation with anyone who you feel it may help. My hope and my prayer is that it can be a conversation starter for people who need to be having these conversations, and that it can lead us all closer to taking better care of our mental health and recognizing our own needs no matter where we are on that journey. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.